I'm of beauty, I'm of splendor, I'll do all so sweet and fair. Almost surely gazing in wonder at thy gifts so rich and rare. Rivers, valleys, hills and mountains, all these gifts we do extol. Healthy land, so like all fountains, giving share that warms the soul. Dominica, God has blessed thee with a climate benign and bright, pastures green and flowers of beauty, filling all with pure delight, and a people strong and healthy, full of godly reverent fear. May we ever seek to praise thee for these gifts so rich and rare. Come ye forward, sons and daughters of this gem beyond compare. Strive for honor, sons and daughters, do the right, be firm, be fair. Toil with hearts and hands and voices, we must prosper. Sound the call in which everyone rejoices. For each and each for
Dominica, good night, everyone. Listen to us on land, online, on sea, wherever you are listening to us. Good night. The Electoral Reform Coalition welcomes you tonight because we are sounding the call. We must prosper. We must do the right. We must be firm. We must be firm. All for each and each people. But without any further ado, ask those of you on the Zoom platform to mute your mics, and then we will go right into prayer. So our Father who art in heaven can bless our proceedings tonight. Pastor Rodney, Dr. Pastor Rodney, the floor is yours.
The scripture says to us, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, seek my face, turn from the wicked ways and pray, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sins and I will heal their land. So says 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verse 12. that background and with what we have on hand tonight, let us pray. Father, it is you we go to, because indeed you are the Alpha and you are the Omega, you are the first and the last. Without you, Lord, we would not have been here. And without your hand and your mercy, our lives would have been miserable. We approach your throne tonight for an urgent and critically important national issue. We are at the cost of our leader literally going rogue on our constitution. And we commit that in your hands. We fight as much as we can, but Lord, we ask of you to lead us. We ask of you to grant us guidance. We ask of you to stand not only with intelligence and academic excellence, but we ask of you to cause us to stand with spiritual wisdom. And Father God, whatever we do, we will judge according to your desires, that this nation, Father God, will be lifted for your honor and glory, and that truly we will become all what you want us to become. Bless this meeting as you cause all of us with one intention and one focus to follow after you and to do all what you have asked us to do. Give us the grace, grant us the fortitude, grant us one mind tonight. By the end of this meeting, that we all will be singing from the same hymn sheet, that Dominica will be saved. And for that, we'll be mindful to give you thanks and praise and glory and honor. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.
Amen and amen. Thank you, Reverend Pastor Dr. Rodney. And with this blessing, we can look forward to a very instructive, informative, and empowering evening with the ERC. But why are we here tonight? I'm going to ask to take the microphone, Mr. Johnson Boston, the chairperson of the ERC, who will give us introductory remarks, and this will give you an idea where are we going tonight. In the meantime, or before he begins, I would like to tell our viewers, you can see us. We know you don't only like to hear us, you like to see us, so you can look Lofty Live, is streaming, as well as Emo News. So, Mr. Boston, take the microphone.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And let me say it's a pleasure to be here tonight. And you asked while we're here, but before I go into while we're here, I just want to say as well, we have Q95 FM radio, who is with us and carrying these proceedings live. We also have DNO, who you can view there as well on DNO, who is carrying this proceeding live. And I want to commend all those who have, come together over the recent few days. We had a very short period to prepare and to get things in motion, but we want to ensure that the government recognize that we are not abandoning the electoral reform struggle. We're there, we're in it. We are on this road for more than 14 years, and in these 14 years, we are not just gone to our bed and lie there and said nothing. We did all what we could to ensure that the government heard us, and not to hear us in a very, arrogant manner, but to hear us in a very professional way. So we did quite a lot to ensure that they hear us, and we participated in the electoral process that is ongoing. And we saw the military crew that is being employed by the government to kind of keep the citizenry away from the whole discussion exercise. I personally do not know why a government would want to have this major discussion going on, and the various stakeholders, they are being sidelined from this issue. And at the Prime Minister's press conference on Friday, 14th December, with a permanent trick of deception. The Prime Minister blatantly lied to the citizenry of the country of Dominica and the international community about his machinations in manipulating the electoral reform process in Dominica. The Prime Minister Skerrit attempted to mislead the population into believing that the presentation of the three bills related to the electoral legislation to be presented to Parliament on Monday, 16th December 2024, for the first reading is just a matter of formality because his 19-2 parliamentary majority will have the opportunity to make changes during the second and third reading of the bills. This statement by the Prime Minister is an insult to the intelligence of the Dominican people and a clear indication of the level of utter disrespect Prime Minister Skerrit has for the citizenry. Knows that any piece of legislation that goes before Parliament is automatically approved by his parliamentarians without any question, and to deny the people of Dominica the opportunity to analyze the draft legislation presented by Sir Dennis Byron, the recommendation of the Electoral Commission, and the legislation that is being presented to Parliament proves his intention to fool the Dominican people. The Prime Minister has failed to mention the critical recommendation from Sir Dennis Byron that has completely deleted from his draft legislation, namely all sections related to campaign financing and the fact that the Chief Elections Officer is given the responsibility to determine the requirements for voter identification cards. Is in previous statements, the Prime Minister stated that the question of campaign financing was too much of a complicated matter for the Dominican people to understand, and that nowhere in CARICOM such legislation existed. Okay, so our aim tonight basically is to really understand what is involved, and the Prime Minister's whole imagination. The Electoral Reform Committee Coalition, was formed in 2022, and the whole idea after the Prime Minister called this snap election for an election after he received a letter from Sir Dennis Byron indicating that his work would be completed in the first quarter of 2023, and then in the first quarter of 2022, that was 2023, sorry, and that he would make his reports available to the Prime Minister and the country after he had had wide discussion with the Electoral Commission. Then the Prime Minister went and called the snap election of 2022, and the Electoral Reform Coalition was formed with persons from various parties and civil society, and we have done all within our power, including we went to his office to make a presentation, which he was not there, and his secretary received it, she signed receive, but he have never acknowledged receipt of that document. We deliver one to the Electoral Commission, they too have never acknowledged receipt of it, and we deliver one to the President's office, and the President's office receive acknowledgement, and so forth. So that's where we are with this matter, and we have wrote countless of letters to the Prime Minister and to asking for a meeting. We have never met with him. The Electoral Commission never met with them. We met with the President. The Attorney General was there, and we had a very, I think, cordial exchange there between the President, the Attorney General, and ourselves, and so forth. So we as citizens believe we have a right to stand up for what is right. The political parties in Dominica, including the Labour Party, have a right to put forward their plans, their programs to the country and its people, but they should not feel that the whole question of electoral reform is something that they must kidnap and direct it to themselves so that they can remain in office as long as they wish. The country must have an opportunity where the citizens will be in charge of its government. They can change government whenever the government is not performing in their interests, and they can award government when they're doing well. And the reason why our sister islands have passed us is because they too have had reform, The OS paid for the reform. We were at the time discussing reform, and we dragged it until we reached where we are now, having to pay thousands of dollars for our own exercise. And even when we pay this huge amount to Sudanese Byron, the Prime Minister put this aside and decided to do his own thing. So we want to show them that we are not abandoning the struggle for comprehensive electoral reform for Dominica. So on Monday, God's willing, the 16th, we'll go to Parliament. Many of us can go and sit in there to hear, let them see us, that they will know we are interested, we are committed to this fight, and we're asking persons to come outside of Parliament, those who don't want to come inside, and let the government know that there is a core or a group or a large amount of Dominicans who are saying, let us do the right thing and get reform out of the way in the right way once and for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the ERC, and you heard it from him. That is why we are here tonight with this virtual rally, and this is why we'll be in and in front of the Parliament on Monday morning, Monday, December 16th. We must not be denied. We, the people, must not be denied. We have a voice, and we must be heard. I heard Mr. Johnson say they have kidnapped. I want to use a local palace word in Dominica. The Prime Minister has blockaded, if there is a past tense to it, blockade the electoral reform. We need to see what is in there. So that's why we are here tonight. I'm going to ask, so we have a long list of speakers who we've told you so much before, but you know, in times of crisis, there's always a few people who say, I didn't know, I didn't hear. So we bring in the information again to you tonight. So you will have a reason to stand. You won't be standing and say, I don't know why I'm standing. You need to know why this is a crisis. And as we go, I'll introduce you to our various speakers. But first on the list is Mr. Nicholas George. Mr. Nicholas George is a member of the United Workers' Party. I will tell you, just a reminder, the Electoral Reform Commission is made up of we the people, and that includes some groups like the Dominican Association of Evangelical Churches. We have a representative. We have NJAM, National Joint Action Movement, Concerned Citizens, Civic Vibes, and all the political parties. And of course, I didn't introduce myself. I am Rosie Felix, and the name Rosie Sparks has stayed for me, but we have a group of women behind us because women, we are important in the electoral process as well. So, Mr. George, this is your time now. Take the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Felix, and good evening to everybody on the program this evening. I'm going to start by outlining that I have read very briefly the 3 bits of legislation that the government uploaded on its website. And among the many areas that we raised with them, areas of concern, I will not go into all of them, but the main ones I will. In Sir Dennis Byron's bill, Sir Dennis Byron recommended comprehensive campaign finance reform recommendations. And we find in the government bill that they posted on their website yesterday that they jettisoned that. It is too long for me to read because we've asked them to put all the recommendations back in the draft bills in their entirety. So the government ignored that. In the voters' identification cards, where we've been asking for voter identification card, that is provided for in section 13 of the regulations and regulation 10.3D. Very interestingly, right here, the government has not published the regulations And I want to say that the law that we are speaking about and what the government is paying attention to now is the second most important piece of legislation in the governance of Dominica. In some respects, it gives effect to the Constitution. It allows for the election of parliamentary representatives who, when in parliament, elect the president, who appoints people to the different commissions, include and also the prime minister and ministers. And therefore, if the law that is before us goes to parliament as it is, in its corrupt machinations, then it will issue for us a corrupt government. And everything that comes, everything that would issue from that kind of legislation that would be corrupt, in effect, we would be legislating corruption in Dominica. And that is one of the reasons why we must oppose that. The voter identification card provision is made for it in the government's draft bill. However, the stipulations, the statutory stipulations that we've asked for that be part of the bill are absent in their bill. So the chief registering officer has the latitude to determine what he will accept from an elector as proof that they are who they are, and then issue them a card. And that card will not have a fingerprint attached to it, as represented currently on the bill, the Registration of Electors Act. That a draft picture of the ID card is in the first schedule, form 7 of the schedule. That is there in the Government's Act. For the first time, we're seeing that, but it does not make provisions for the fingerprints. Only makes provisions for a picture, but it does not make provisions for the fingerprint. And the Electoral Commission Act. So Dennis Byron prescribed that the tenure of the chief elections officer should move from age 55 to 65. The government has prescribed that the retirement age of the chief elections officer will be 55 years, and that is found in section 710 of the Electoral Commission Act. So even there, despite all that we have said, and when the immediate past chief elections officer was there, we were making recommendations that be moved to 65. If that is the scroll to 710. Scroll to 710. And there. Pursuant to section 8710 of the Constitution, the age at which the chief elections officers shall vacate office is the prescribed age of 55. So Dennis Byron recommended 65. We don't know what the Electoral Commission commented on, what their comments were. So these are three of the main areas that I have found in the short time that I had gone, because these were main areas of concern to us. And I read through them. I also want to draw attention to the fact that the Electoral Reform Coalition had written its views and recommendations to the Prime Minister. And we all know and remember that somewhere in June or July of this year, he rubbished the letter that had been sent to him and said it was disrespectful to the Prime Minister's office and that he had thrown it in the waste paper basket. Today, Saturday, 14th of December, we are dealing with the information that the Prime Minister is about to introduce these bills on the 16th. I want to draw your attention to what we had written in June. In April, to the Prime Minister, we said inflammatory statements. In April of 2024, as part of the management of this electoral reform process, you made inflammatory statements in the public sphere saying you are going full steam ahead with electoral reform, that you will not tolerate any foolishness in the process. When the Prime Minister was making his presentation at the budget debate in August of this year, he again made inflammatory statements and threats. And I'm going to paraphrase that he said, don't look at me as the docile person that you see. You can come with your protests, your demonstrations. We will show you the organizing ability of the Labour Party. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a threat that the ERC took seriously, that we wrote the Secretary General of CARICOM, asking her to dispatch an impasse prevent and intervention team to Dominica to deal with that, because the ERC felt that that threat meant that the Prime Minister was readying the Labour Party that he leads to come in conflict with anybody who stands in protest against what he is doing. We have not heard from the Secretary General of CARICOM. And I'm going to end by saying something that has hurt me personally, is that on the 10th of November, we had two prime ministers visit Dominica. One of them, Prime Minister Dickon Michel, contested an election and won. And he won it through the sacrifice of Dominican police officers, and I being one of them, when we helped liberate Grenada in 1983 and restored democratic principles and laws in Grenada that allowed Prime Minister Michel to now be elected through a democratic system. But he came here and in Vieques, he touched a bell, called upon a bell to be rung for the Prime Minister to call for election on the 10th, knowing full well that we have not been the beneficiary in Dominica of legislation that would lead to free and fair election. And Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre as well called upon everyone, the Prime Minister as well, bring the bell, ring it in Dominica. And he called me an enemy of my state because I have proven to be resolute in my stance against what the Prime Minister is doing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll finish with that finish here by saying that none of our Caribbean prime ministers have any credibility whatsoever for their failing to intervene between the citizenry of Dominica and the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. George, for this intervention. And we can very well identify with you because recently we saw these prime ministers come to Dominica. But in your presentation, of course, you told us many things, but one of the things that jumped out at me, and it is the most vexing issue, and we know that our Dominican Prime Minister just does not want campaign financing. And this is a critical component of any electoral reform that would lead to free and fair election. So thank you for that, as well as reminding the people that we wrote to CARICOM. Before we get to Monday, we did many things. We informed many authorities, not only in Dominica, but in the region, including CARICOM, which has remained mute. Let us go to our next speaker because we don't have all night here. We have two presenters on the platform from the Dominicans in the Diaspora, and they've got a voice. Our first is Mr. Zed Lloyd. Mr. Lloyd would be happy if you turn on your camera because our viewers want to see you.
My camera is on, Sister Rosie. I don't know why you're not seeing
Oh,
me.
okay, here you go. You've been so still, it looked like a still photo. Welcome. Happy to hear from you
Welcome.
tonight. Take it away.
Yeah. Good evening, sister. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening to the listeners. Good evening, Dominicans, both at home and abroad. I want to touch on two areas quickly. It won't be long. No, we're running for time. But I want to say that we're dealing with an organization and that has been very, if you want to use it, unfaithful in dealing with the public and Dominicans on this issue of electoral reform. We recently had Brother George talked about the electoral, the chief elections officer, and we recently had a coup in the whole election officer approach. And then we saw these things on there giving authority to the electoral officer. So what we're facing is a situation where an electoral officer that is in sync with the government has been conveniently put in place. And then all of these latitudes are placed into this new set of bills that gives the electoral officer a whole lot of power above the citizens. And that worries me. I think a lot of things in that thing should have involved not just the electoral officer, but the electoral commission has to be involved in the decision-making process of things that are approved and not approved in our election process. So I want us to make sure that we push for this moving forward. Secondly, the issue of confirmation of voters. I think once we approach that point, we are going down a slippery slope. And one of the things I hope we can be adamant about, and that's been shown in all these other Caribbean countries, St. Kitts, Antigua, all these places have more people than us. We are one of the smallest populations in the region. You hear? One of the smallest. And we have these countries doing an entire re-registration process, cleaning their list, not for a difficult thing of who we can confirm. No, a re-registration process. You understand? And they've pulled off these things in months. In a few months. It's not abstract, it is concrete, empirical reality. And so I think in Dominica, we need to put our foot down and call for nothing less than a complete re-registration process when it comes to this election process. That is the only way I think we can ensure a clean list and a process of starting on the right foot, and we can deal with this whole corruption issue that comes into our thing. So I want to call upon the Dominicans. Monday is not just a quiet thing. Make your placards. You're hearing points tonight. Write your placards out. Amplify these points to the government and amplify it to others. There's some fundamental things that we should not compromise on. And I think one of those fundamental things is that need for a whole re-registration process of Dominicans to our voting list. I think that is critical. The other issue beyond the idea of the re-registration process that bothers me is we have this posture in Dominica by the government on the issue of not taking into account the concerns of the citizens. And so we must ensure that the decisions that are made in that electoral process moving forward has to involve a level of consultation, not just with the Electoral Commission, but with we the people. We the people. We need to put our foot down and make sure we ensure a new registration process and a consultation process that is active and ongoing. I think if we can deal with these two things, I think we can ensure that we move forward properly. The idea of biometric, Brother George talks about, I think that is the other issue that I want to make sure that we do not compromise on. Because if we do not have biometric measures within that reform process, then getting robbed will continue. Thank you very much. I want to call upon the citizens to come out on Monday and bring your placards and support the move. We stand with you in the diaspora and we're there with you in spirit and in love. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Zed Lloyd. Thank you so much for this intervention as well. And what is jumping out at me is re-registration process, biometrics. That is critical. This is going to help us to weed out the thieves in election. Again, our time
Exactly.
is running out. I'm going to call right away Mrs. Adelaide Paul, our Dominican sister right there in the diaspora, but her heart is here on Dominica. Open your microphone, and you've got 5 minutes, Mrs. Paul.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sister Rosie, and thank you to everyone who is here tonight, continuing the fight. I was asked to give a contribution on behalf of the diaspora. I was also asked, what will I be speaking about? And I pondered that for the entire day. And I think the word I can think of is perseverance. And I just kind of want to read this. Today, I was asked to make a contribution as one who resides in the diaspora. Can probably refer to it as speaking on behalf of or representing the diaspora. As far as I can tell, we are all Dominicans, no matter how far away we are, and the issues of our island do affect us directly and indirectly. The fight for electoral reform in Dominica has been a very long and hard battle. Many have sacrificed everything to ensure that our blessed land will remain a country for future generations where we will have the ability to change governments freely. Dominica can realize its fullest potential because, after all, this is the premise upon which democracy exists. Today, I speak about perseverance, the will to continue going on even when it seems like it's hopeless. Perseverance requires courage, and courage needs faith. The great freedom fighter Nelson Mandela once said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." How do we conquer fear? We conquer fear by coming together. We conquer fear by standing together as one. We have a bully in Dominica who has weaponized the people's sovereignty to keep them fearful so he can continue to devour them. You know how you defeat a bully? You stand up to that bully. There are more of us in and for this fight than there are against this fight. This fight is a people's fight. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because his conscience tells him it is right. Let's talk about fighting the bully through collective action. Yesterday, I understand that there was a press conference at 12 p.m. That press conference was later changed to 3 p.m. I listened to the press conference, and while I know it may be difficult to listen to someone who consistently tells untruths or lies and continues to disrespect us and talk down in a condescending manner, that bully could not help but listen to Matt Peltier's afternoon show. He admitted it himself, and you know why? Because there was a difference in the way we spoke. When Matt Peltier asked him that very important question about electoral reform, and Matt mentioned the mood of the people, the bully downplayed it, chuckled and said, "Which people? You mean Loftus and Bosso and the 6 people who call your program?" Guess what? Something caught his attention why he switched the time of his press conference and made it later in the day. He wanted to listen to the people because he heard or was told that the sentiments of the people. The bully was warned by the CCJ that depriving the people of electoral reform will lead to unrest, but the bully has not listened. What he has not accepted is the fact that the sentiments around the island is terrible. Everyone, including the people who support him, is a victim of a government that has been in power for far too long and has stripped every Dominican, except for the select few in its upper echelon, the opportunity to provide for and enjoy a life of endless opportunities. What a Grinch again. If it is not calling elections in December, it is disrupting the people from enjoying their Christmas by trying to shove his reforms down their throats when he thinks that they are occupied with other things. He should be aware that the so-called 6 people referred to on Matt's program represent 6,000 people who are disappointed with their conditions right now, and the 6 people are speaking for them. That is the only reason he moved his conference to later that day and tried to downplay the people's concern. My people, that bully is getting scared. Otherwise, he would have totally ignored Matt's program and he would have had his press conference at 12 as originally planned. We must think like the bully. We must realize that we have to continue the fight. We have to persevere. We cannot stop moving. On Monday, The people must stand because giving up is not an option. We have to send that fear factor right back to the bully, because the only way we can defeat a bully is by standing up and facing that bully head on. The parliament belongs to we the people, not a select few people handpicked by a bully. Free and fair elections are for all the citizens, and we will continue the fight until we see it through. No election will be called a wrong carnival until we get true reforms. Remember, people, that perseverance, courage, and faith go hand in hand. It means that we will unite in faith to give each one the courage whenever they feel fearful, so we can continue going in order to persevere. And tonight I end with these words by Dr. King. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Now is the time to stand for electoral reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Paul. You hit that nail so hard. I was just stuck and I forgot to time you. You ponged that nail there real hard. The only way we confront the only way we face our fear is to confront the bully. Yes, and that is why we need to do. I'm glad for this intervention, because time and time again, we hear of people out there who are afraid. They have 100 reasons why they're afraid, but it is important to beat that fear, and whatever that confront that bully in this moment, in this crisis, in this 11th hour. The bully is Roosevelt's carrot, and we're going to confront him on Monday. He's scared. I know he is scared, and he's listening to us now and doing things I won't mention on air. So our time is running out. Thank you for that. We're going to call Wayne James. Wayne James is a commissioner, electoral commissioner, and I know when Wayne James speaks tonight, everybody listens, and I know he's also going to speak for his compañero, Miss Hillary Shillingford. Wayne James, open your microphone and take it away. Wayne James, are you there?
This is Rosie Felix. Are you hearing me?
Loud and clear.
I want to say, first of all, thanks very much for this invite. I want to congratulate the organizers of this momentous gathering this evening. And I'm happy you said that I'm speaking on behalf of Hillary Shillingford and myself. That's what I have done all the time. You know, it's a partner that I've had on the commission that I really can't ask for anybody better than Hillary Shillingford.
Mr. James, is it possible we see you? Our viewers looking forward to see you.
I am so sorry that I can't put my camera on, because at this time I'm at my business place. You know, I have to try to make a living for myself. So there are persons around, and I really don't want, you know, so sorry about that. I should have said that before.
We know your voice can make up for that. So
yes. Thanks very much for understanding. So right. I want to say good evening to everybody that's on this program this evening. And as I said, I think it's a momentous occasion for us here in Dominica, those here and those overseas. I'm going to be very brief, because, you know, persons have listened to Hillary Shillingford and myself over the years as your representatives on the Electoral Commission. We have understood the work that we have to do. We understood that the work that is on the Electoral Commission for us, it is the people's business. We took 2 oaths when we were sworn in as commissioners, and none of them was secretive oaths. So as a result of that, some persons might say, oh, why is it that Hillary Shillingford and Wayne James has to take the Electoral Commission business in the public? That's the people's business. And we understand that very well. We make no apologies for this. And as such, we will continue doing that. What I just want to deal with this evening is, in relation to the proposed bills that is going to be introduced to the House on Monday, I want to deal with the Constitution. The constitutional requirement for the government at Section 51 in the Constitution, it says that any proposed bills that is dealing with the representation of senators or members in the House that these bills must be sent or shall be sent to the Electoral Commission, giving us sufficient time so that we can make our comments. I want to say this evening that has been done. The government, somewhere in June, they send out the draft legislation, 3 pieces of legislation: the Electoral Commission bill, the Registration of Electors Act and Regulations, the House of Assembly Elections Act and Regulations. So they did that. We deliberated over a period of about 2 months, and then when we were completed, we submitted a 23-page document, including 2 forms that we figure wanted to be adjusted, and we have sent that to the government. But having said that, this constitutional requirement has been achieved. It is my view that there is something they call natural justice, and there is something about good faith. It is my view here this evening, and I want everybody to understand that I believe that seeing that we received those draft legislations, we made recommendations and we sent it to the government. I believe that it is just fitting, it is just respect. Taking into consideration, the government has 2 representatives on the commission. It is my view that I believe that the pieces of legislation that is now in the hands of the parliamentarians should have been in the hands of members of the Electoral Commission. But sad to say, I have not seen those documents, and I can speak for Hillary Shillingford. He has not seen those documents. That does not say, I want to really put it on the record, that the chairman and the 2 representatives for the government does not have this document in their hands. That, for me, is something that is plain in my mind, because I cannot believe that the government can be so disrespectful. So I am saying to everybody this evening, now is the time for us to stand. I will be there on Monday. Hillary Shillingford will be there on Monday. And I called on the radio, and I have said to the Prime Minister, I think the best thing that he can do for Dominica is withdraw those bills, give the people of Dominica, give the Electoral Commission an opportunity to look at those bills. Because for me, I cannot at this point in time speak on those proposed legislation on bills that is before the parliament, because I've not seen them, and I can't compare them with the recommendations that we have submitted to the government. So I'm saying, for me as a commissioner, I think that is gross disrespect, and I think the people of Dominica must stand. This electoral reform business has become a vexing issue in Dominica. And Mrs. Felix, I want to agree with you that the only reason the Prime Minister pushed back his press conference yesterday is because he wanted to get a feel as to the people of Dominica, what they are saying. I think he has understood this, and it's not about persons opposing his policies in government. It's also about his people. Because for me, I consider myself a people's person, and persons that are supporting the Labour Party have said to me clearly, Wayne James, Roosevelt Skerrit is playing the fool. He needs to do the electoral reform and get it over with and done. So as I said, I'm going to be there on Monday. I want to encourage everybody that is in Dominica. I know those of you in the diaspora, you will be giving your support in whatever way that you can give, but we are going to stand, and we are going to ensure that any legislation that is going to be dealing with electoral reform, it is going to be the legislation that the people of Dominica wants to go to the parliament. Having said that, I want to say good evening, God's blessings to everyone, and see you all on Monday. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Wayne James, up there in the cool East, a wise man from the East. Well, Mr. James is not the only one that is disrespected. The whole of Dominica, a whole nation, has been disrespected by a prime minister whose sole interest is to leave a legacy of dishonesty. Because if you go to Parliament to pass legislation that will legitimize your stealing of election, that cannot be a legacy of integrity. Again, that's why we're here tonight. There's a disrespect to our electoral commissioners, and it's a bad faith on the part of Roosevelt Skerrit and his compañeros in the Parliament. So again, its Speaker is encouraging you to come out on Monday. We need to confront that bully. We need electoral reform for our great-grandchildren who have not even been conceived yet. If they want to run for public office, they can meet a level playing field when that time comes. Let's now go on to our next speaker. Mr. Joshua Francis, are you here?
Hi, good evening.
Here you go. So, Mr. Joshua Francis, attorney at law and a political party's leader or representative, he'll tell us more. Mr. Joshua, take the microphone.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair Lady, and good evening to Dominica. Good evening to all the beautiful people who have taken their time to be part of this program this evening. Of course, this is really, really important for us to discuss. And this evening, I want to touch on campaign finance. It is not campaign finance reform because we do not have campaign finance legislation. Neither the government is going to Parliament to do any reading in connection with campaign finance. As a matter of fact, the bills which have been presented to Parliament fail to capture anything whatsoever on campaign finance. So for those of us who understand the electoral process and the power of money in our campaign, in our electoral process, we must ask the government the question, why isn't there any legislation concerning campaign finance? Universally, money has become a big muscle in the outcome of elections. And we understand that there may be some level of complication in putting legislation together, but there are existing legislations from which this government could take a model, the Jamaican model. Even in Antigua, there isn't a parent legislation in respect to electoral campaign finance, but there are legislations mentioning campaign finance. Why is campaign finance important? Well, over the years, we have seen how campaign finance has influenced the outcome of elections in Dominica. Big money has been used to bring big artists in Dominica. Big money has been used to bribe voters. Big money has been used to transport supporters of the Dominican Labour Party from different parts of the world into Dominica. Not only purchase of tickets, pocket change, putting people up at hotels. That is what big money has been able to do here in Dominica. So we must have concerns. The government of Dominica, why isn't it you're being fair to the people of Dominica and to seize that opportunity to pass campaign finance legislation? Now, why would we want campaign finance legislation? Under the current electoral process and system, there isn't any law or regulation in respect to campaign finance. And what does that mean? There isn't any law as far as any political party or political entity mandated by law to provide source of funding, whether private, from a company, or an individual. There is no law whatsoever. There is no restriction on campaign spending. There is no law in respect to accountability. So political parties at this hour can raise as much funds as they want, and there isn't any law saying you have raised enough. There isn't any law saying you must not accept money from foreigners. There isn't any law saying you must not accept money from persons who are engaged in illicit activities. Now, why is that important? That is important because money providers, the source of money, can influence the actors and players in the political field. When a politician takes money from a particular source, that source can pull strings. And there are suspicions in Dominica, suspicions that a lot of campaign funds may be coming from abroad, which means that that source of funding can have some kind of influence over the outcome of elections in Dominica. So, ladies and gentlemen, we must ask a question. Dominica Labour Party government, that's what we're calling them here, because of course the Dominica Labour Party, the party that has formed this government, the ruling party, why is it that you're not interested in campaign finance? We want campaign finance. So Byron provided recommendations. He provided recommendations as far as why we should have campaign finance. He gave recommendations to the government of Dominica. It appears there was no consideration for these recommendations because there is no voice. There isn't any representation in the legislations which are being taken before Parliament. So in that respect, I want Dominicans to understand why campaign finance is important. Without campaign finance regulations, it means there's a lack of transparency. Where there is a lack of transparency, it breeds corruption. Where there is corruption, it results in adverse outcomes against the interests of the people. We need campaign finance. So, Madam Chair, I'm making this very short. I'm taking this opportunity to ask Dominicans to converge within the precincts of the House of Parliament on Monday to show support to all of us who are looking, who are watching, and we want to send a message to the government of Dominica that we want fair, just, and equitable campaign finance legislation, electoral legislation. Of course, these three bills, there's some concession. There are some concessions in the bills. We are happy for that, but there is more that we would like. So we must come out in large numbers to show our support. We must come out in large numbers to stand with Dominica. We must come out in large numbers to stand for, as you always say, Madam Chair, Ma Dominique, Whitey Kubuli.
That's right.
So having said that, I want to say season greetings to everyone. I know that is, at this time of the night, you would like to be with your family, you would maybe like to be out there having a glass of wine, but because you understand the urgency and the significance of the matter at hand, you decided to be here this evening. And for that, we must applaud you, but we need you to show up on Monday. We're not going out there to cause any disturbance. We're going out there basically to send a very strong message to the world that the people of Dominica want legislation that is fair and just, so we can have a level playing field, so we can have more transparency and accountability in our electoral process in Dominica.
Thank you.
Having said that, thank you so much.
Francis. Thank you. And Mr. Francis, again, has brought the connection with money and abuse. He reminded us, I like to say, Matt Dominic, the Roosevelt-Skerrit government is using money to abuse Matt Dominic. And we know what money and abuse have in common. When guys offer women money and they use them because the women don't have, so they use their money to abuse. And that is exactly. So we need to know where the money, not only of the Labour Party, but the UWP, any political party that puts itself up for election, we want to know where the money is coming from, and we want a limit. Nobody should be telling Matt Dominic, it is none of your business. It is our business. It is our country. It is our campaign. It is us, the voters, that come to support. We need to know everything. We need transparency. Thanks for that, Mr. Francis. And I will now call on Mr. Linton. Mr. Linton, when Mr. Linton speaks, everybody listens. And we've heard his voice on that topic over and over. But we're repeating it so no one will say they did not know. They did not know why we're standing. Somebody told me, Mr. Skerrit said, he doesn't know why we're deciding to come to Parliament on Monday morning. Well, I hope he's listening so he knows why. Mr. Linton, take the floor.
Good evening, Madam Chair, and good evening to the 50+ people who are on this Zoom, all those who are listening via Q95, those who are joining us via DNO and Loftus Live, and those who are joining us via MO News as well. Dominicans at home and abroad, patriots of this blessed land, a very good evening to you. I want to thank the organizers for this. It's a very important engagement, and I'm happy that we are standing together under the banner of the Electoral Reform Coalition, continuing the struggle for electoral reform in Dominica that has really been against one man and his gang in government, taking control of our electoral process and thereby depriving the people of Dominica of the right to choose freely and fairly government of the people, government by the people, government for the people, with the majority votes of conscience of the people. And it's regrettable. Roosevelt Skerrit has played the people of Dominica for his fools. He has put us on a merry-go-round of trickery, deception, false hopes, empty promises. All the time, he's systematically abusing, he's tainting, he's manipulating the electoral process to secure his winning legacy in general elections. Everybody remembers Skerrit's advisor, Anthony Astafan, in 2008, 27th of March, telling him that in an email that there is madness going on at the commission and that he needed to call in the Dominica Labour Party nominees on the Electoral Commission at the time, Richard Charles and Kondwani Williams, because these guys are talking about reforms to include ID cards and complete re-registration. Such reforms will undermine your re-election legacy, as the opposition will say, look, the commission agreed with us. Reform was required because of widespread fraud. And I heard Zed Lloyd referring a while ago to the necessity for complete re-registration as opposed to confirmation on the register of voters. So those two reforms basically have been with us for quite some time. The Independent Electoral Commission deciding back in 2008 that they would clean the voters list and they would issue ID cards for voting. So we had this $750,000 Dennis Byron consultancy report and recommendations after a number of years. Those were supposed to revise the electoral laws, and that exercise, unfortunately, with all due respect to Mr. Byron, was about the re-election legacy of Roosevelt Skerrit. Because Byron did not go far enough to protect that legacy of rigged and stolen elections. So some of the major recommendations from that exercise, especially in the area of campaign finance regulation, which Joshua Francis just referred to, those are being discarded. And you'll recall, in July 2022, the Caribbean Court of Justice, our highest court, admonished us about the importance of dealing with a tainted electoral process. They told us there remain grave areas of concern about how the process of the 2019 elections were conducted, and future elections in Dominica ought not to proceed with these or similar taints. We don't want any taints on our election process here or anywhere else in the world, because those severely undermine the integrity and the legitimacy of elections. And we ask ourselves the question now, after all these years of back and forth, after all these years of frustrating the will of the people for free and fair elections by by denying basic reforms to the electoral process, we have come now to a point where Roosevelt Skerrit is going with his team into Parliament on Monday for the first reading of 3 bills. The Electoral Commission Act, the House of Assembly Elections Act, and the Registration of Electors Act. The question we're asking ourselves, do these pieces of legislation, do these laws, proposed laws, address the critical matter of removing the taints on the electoral process to clear the way for free and fair elections in Dominica? Now, in terms of the 2 basic reforms we've been pushing for over the past 20 years, a clean, accurate voters list and ID cards, we can look at what the new electoral laws provide. According to the recommendations of the consultant, the electoral reform consultant, voter identification cards supporting with biometric data, meaning facial recognition and fingerprints, is one of the most important reforms and is essential to eliminate a wide variety of fraudulent conduct at elections, including impersonation and multiple voting. The new Registration of Electors Act, which is going to have its first reading in the Parliament on Monday, provides for ID cards to be used for voting with voter registration number and facial recognition, no fingerprints. Interestingly enough, it is referred to as a voter ID card in the legislation in the segment that sets it up. But when they send you to the form that is supposed to, where you're supposed to see the prescribed information to be used on the form, guess what you learn? The voter ID card has a new name. The name on it is National ID card. And we asked the question, well, is this going to be enough to eliminate wide variety of fraudulent conduct at elections, including impersonation and voting, multiple voting, and so on? That's for consideration. But importantly, if this is going to be a national ID card, then Byron himself had raised questions about the constitutionality of the Electoral Commission handling a national ID card when its remit is election matters. Let's look at the list of the issue of the clean voters list and citizens voting for representation in the Parliament of Dominica who are no longer ordinarily resident, who are ordinarily resident outside of Dominica, represent the taint on the electoral process of Dominica. And if we're going to have an accurate list of voters who are eligible based on the constitutional requirements of citizenship, age, residency, we're going to need a complete re-registration of voters. A complete re-registration of voters. And provisions for the list of voters to be cleansed annually. This new Registration of Electors Act, to be introduced on Monday, seeks to establish a system for electing government that allows citizens who are living overseas, who are not ordinarily resident in Dominica, to choose representatives in the Parliament of Dominica for constituencies where they do not live and therefore cannot be represented. Remember, elections in Dominica are about election of representatives to the House of Assembly. That's why you have the House of Assembly Elections Act. You're voting, the right to vote is the right to put people in the Parliament of Dominica to represent you in Dominica. And it is deeply regrettable that this new Registration of Electors Act is going to legitimize a system for electing government that allows citizens living overseas who are not ordinarily resident in Dominica to be paid to come home to vote to determine the results in constituencies where they do not live and therefore cannot be represented. Then we have the issue that have been referred to, this campaign finance regulations that the Electoral Reform Consultant proposed for inclusion in the new House of Assembly Elections Act. All of those provisions have been set aside. So there will be no restrictions on election campaign spending. There'll be no regulation of sources of election campaign funding. No regulation of election campaign financing means money has the controlling influence in our political system such that elections are determined and or purchased by big money interest or criminal enterprises. Remember December 2014, the Commonwealth Observer Mission told us that the general election in Dominica was free but not fair due to multiple instances of cheating and bribery, including the transportation of electors to the island to vote and the apparent abuses of incumbency, including a lack of impartiality in the provision of public services. These are taints on the process. The provisions against bribery and cheating in the new House of Assembly Elections Act do not cover the payment of air and sea transportation for voters living overseas and the payment of free entertainment for voters. These taints on the electoral process are major crimes that have determined the outcome of elections over the past 20 years. Yet, the new act does not have even the avoidance of doubt clause that the payment or promise of payment to a voter of his traveling expenses on the condition expressed or implied that he would vote for a particular candidate is bribery. And understand clearly what this means, taken together, is that the incumbent Dominican Labour Party has free rein under the incoming laws to continue the practice of using the billions of dollars in the sale of Dominican citizenship that remain unaccounted for, to pay Dominicans not resident in Dominica to determine representation in the Parliament of Dominica for persons resident in Dominica. There is no provision in the new House of Assembly Election Act to eliminate from our system of electing government in Dominica the use of state resources, such as public funds or government-operated facilities to support a particular candidate or party. The new election law does not address the lack of impartiality in the provision of public services and clear breaches of the civil service staff regulations where public servants are openly politically partisan and assist in the distribution of and provision of government services and goods in the campaign season. You have the taint of skewed. Thank you very much.
Our time is run out on you.
Thank you very much.
But yes, I'm going to help you there, Mr. Linton, because I had to cut you short. I'm going to re-say what you said in a way that every little girl and boy, even if they can't vote, going to understand. I'm sure those of you on our Zoom platform tonight and those listening, many people have experienced a thief come into their house, break into their house. So after that has happened, you decide to put some security things. And let us compare our electoral reform, our voting system to a house that a thief has come in and broken into. But the family has decided we need to do some things. The head of this family is Roosevelt Skerritt, and he's saying there shall be no rules on who can walk into the house, so anybody can come in. There shall be no burglar bars. There shall be no doors, no locks, no keys, no lights in the house, no security cameras, no guard dogs, no gates. He does not want electricity, I said that. And anyone can walk into the house. And no one must ask the head of the house where the income for this house comes in. That is what we are facing with electoral reform. So the cheating and the stealing can continue. Thank you for that, Mr. Linton. Thank you for putting it in the legal language, the constitutional language, the electoral language. But I just had to say it in another language, so no one has no excuse not to come out on Monday morning because our house is open wide with no security, but we need to go and secure our house, secure Matt Dominic's house. Thank you for that. Our technician is going to play us a clip of what the bully had to say on Friday afternoon.
And if the guy beats Thompson on Sunday, then he will have opportunity now to say he's representing the UWP. Well, half of the UWP, I don't know.
Mr. Prime Minister, while I respect your views, but I'm just coming from a talk show, speaking to a lot of the people out there. I can tell you based on what I'm hearing, sir, there's a lot of mobilization. People are upset. They're saying that you're not presenting bills in favor of the people of Dominica. And they will stand. So I'm saying, Mr. Prime Minister, are you satisfied that the bills you're bringing before Parliament at this time represent the views of the people of Dominica, and the bills are representing, as it relates to giving people bills that are equal, that present a level playing field?
Sure. Yeah. No. If I were to say you just keep on hosting a talk show, what are
very popular talk show.
What are the specific points which the people who you spoke to in this talk show, the two people who you spoke to in the talk show,
Two people, sir?
Two of them you were there. Two, I think, Loftus Duran and
No, I'm talking about the general people.
Yeah, but who else? I mean,
Many people, sir.
yeah, but what are the points they raised, or specific points, and which bills and they raised the issue with? Because there are 3 bills before the parliament.
Let me at least point to
Yeah, point on.
point to two. In terms of registration of voters and persons flying in from overseas
Yeah, fine.
to vote in Dominica. These are 2 of the main issues that they represented.
Well, the issue of
And they're basically saying you want these bills to protect your legacy,
protect what legacy? My
to remain in power.
My only legacy is legacy of service to people. That's what I'm legacy of service. People who know me, I'm not a celebratory person and so on. So I don't pay attention to the legacy. The issue of registration. Now, you have a process of confirmation, and you'll have a period within which you can avail yourself to be confirmed. After that period is over, then that is the list that one will use once you give yourself an opportunity to be confirmed. Now, persons who are living overseas, for them to remain on the voters list, they'll have to fly to Dominica to be confirmed. Because remember, originally, we were going the route of St. Kitts and Nevis, where they went to major capitals around the world where Kittitians and Nevisians were resident, and avail the opportunity to give them the opportunity to have themselves confirmed. The opposition in Dominica was opposed to that, though the government was in favor of going the St. Kitts route. In an effort towards giving and taking, we decided, okay, we will scrap the notion of the Electoral Commission going to capitals where that's what makes a difference in the lives of people. You know, caring for people, that's the difference. And they don't have that. So trying to get that through a legislation, they're going to work. And so, Matt, the Labour Party has 19 seats in the parliament. We all represent the constituency. So where's the majority we're talking about? Majority view we're talking about? We all represent constituents. We all engage constituents on their views. And I can tell you that when I go across Dominica, there are many Labour Party supporters who are upset with me because I have given up on some of the things that they believe I should not have given up on as part of the process. When I consult Labour rights across Dominica, that's one of the things they raise at me. Prime Minister, I hear you, but you're soft. They accuse me of being soft. You know, I mean, this is what happening. So I'm not sure what is about the majority view. Loftus doesn't represent anybody. Mr. Linton doesn't represent anybody. So which majority of you? 2 people you are in talk show, man. And the 5 callers or 6 callers you get within the hour are 5 repeat callers.
Thank you for that reminder, Mr. Mackenzie. But Adelaide Paul dealt with that good and proper. I hope the reception on your end and our viewers heard it all. But Adelaide Paul spoke to this very well in her presentation earlier. So now we're going to go to Mr. Bernard Ito. Mr. Bernard Ito, open your mic and take it away.
Yes, good evening, Rosie. Good evening to all my fellow presenters, and of course, good evening to the Dominican people, even those who are not here with us, although we have a nice crowd here with us in person or online. But there are many more who they will be speaking to, and the word will spread, and that is the real audience. So good evening to everyone here and those who will be hearing this message. I have listened, and I think my colleagues have covered very well all the important major issues related to this legislation. I don't want to rehash this. I don't want to go back over what they've covered. They've laid it out quite well, the shortcomings of this legislation. But here's the thing, we know that, we expected that, to be honest. We know that this government is not going, under any circumstances, to draft legislation that allows it any sort of fairness to the process. We know that this government coming into this will be draft legislation that will be biased, that will be broken, that will find workarounds, that will find ways to subvert the democratic principles that enshrined in our constitution. So the reality is we cannot, and I don't think for a while we have expected, can expect anything more than what we have received recently from this government. We predicted we would receive such flawed legislation. The only real way to get electoral reform in Dominic is what we need to rally around, and we will push on this issue. We are pushing this, and I say to my colleagues and friends and all my supporters, come out on Monday, let us be present. Let the government know that we are keeping them accountable. We are engaged with the process. We should be civically responsible to be present when we can for such important legislation within the parliament. And I encourage us to do so. We are engaged in the process. We are pushing to the process. We're telling the government our eyes are on you, and we will not relent on this. But the reality is we must rally around a greater cause. And that greater cause must be the replacement of this government, because it is only in that effort, it is only in the effort to replace this government completely and totally that Dominica is going to see anything like electoral reform that makes sense. And so that is my appeal to us as Dominicans to fight this battle, but let us keep the greater war in perspective. And let us do what we can and position ourselves and negotiate and talk to the Dominican people as we're doing here on this issue in a reasonable, practical manner, in a collaborative manner to solve problems. Because at the end of the day, our mission is to replace this government, and that is what we need to stay focused on. On the specific issue of this legislation, I think I want to focus a little bit on all the technical details of it in terms of technology. This is still a 19th century piece of legislation. There are no provisions made for any of the things like a database management, making those lists available in electronic forms, for example. I have to get this list. We all have to get this list. It's this thick. I mean, it is about a foot thick of printed document. And then we have to go through this manually and get to the, why is this not available on a database somewhere? And so and why are the people who need to be changed and the people who need to be registered and so on not automatically done through very trivial analytics? These are the things I think we have to push on a little bit beyond just the legalese. It's the very practical things that allow us as an opposition to have a chance to take this document, to scan through it quickly, to do the analytics, to understand what is going wrong. And that is what we have to do also to do real electoral reform. This government is not going to give us electoral reform. Let us agree on that. But, we can do our own electoral reform. We should take those lists. We should analyze every constituency. We should know who voted for us, why they did, why they didn't. We should know who should be on that list. Dominica is a small country. There's no reason for us not to use modern tools, analytics, run through those lists, scrub through those lists, and understand through local intelligence of communities who should and shouldn't be on this list. So my appeal to us, to all of us, to all the Dominican people, let us collaborate to do our own electoral reform, to clean the voters list ourselves. We don't need to have, once we understand that, then we can contest those things at polls because we are allowed observers. So let us do the things, let us register the young voters, let us understand who's turned 18 in every community, and let us have them sign up. And let us show this government that although they outmuscle us with money, and although they outmuscle us with people on the ground, maybe, that they do not necessarily outmuscle us in thought and intelligence, and in the ability to organize ourselves and to collaborate and in love among ourselves. And that is where we have to triumph over this government. We must have more love among us than they do. We must have more collaboration among us than they do. And we must have more analytical intelligence. We must think through this and play at a higher level of chess than they do. And simply not accept the things that they present to us and play that game, because that game is set up for us to lose. And so my appeal to all of us, as Dominicans, all right-thinking Dominicans who want to see this government replaced, because again, that's the only way we will have electoral reform that makes sense, is for us to collaborate in this manner, for us to organize in this manner, for us to think at a higher level of this manner, and to really think through what it is that we can do to bring a change of government in this country. We have to change even our political philosophies, our political culture. I think we have to have a positive politics because that is what the Dominican people are looking for right now, for problems to be solved, for solutions to their day-to-day problems, for solutions to electoral reform that are self-driven, not driven by Roosevelt Skerritt and his administration and his antics and his theatrics, because we know what it is. We know what it is. We do not want to play that game. So that is my appeal to all of us as a coalition, as an opposition, as a people who can think through things. I want us to beat Roosevelt Skerritt in strategy, in intelligence, in cooperation, in love. And that is what we have started to do here this evening. This first phase to have this online meeting is to bring all right people, thinking people together and say, listen, let us strategize on how we can make this thing happen. And that is what we are going to, that's what we're going to accomplish. And so Monday, again, we're appealing to everyone, come out there. It's important that you show your physical presence. It's great to be online and great to be on Zoom, but we need to let the government know there are Dominicans willing to make the minimum sacrifice to show up, not to protest, not to create hell, not to create a dilemma, to show that we are willing to cooperate in the business of government, that we are willing, informed citizens, active citizens, concerned citizens, responsible citizens, and that necessity that we be involved in the process of governance. And what could be more important than a process of governance leading to electoral reform? And that is what this is about. This is what this whole movement is about, is to activate citizenship at a higher level, activate our strategic thinking, activate our ability to be self-determined in having solutions. And so we appeal to you to join that process, join that movement. Let us take it to the next level and let us get a government in place that can take Dominica and make Dominica the sort of place it should always be, should have been years ago, a prosperous, wealthy, well-run, well-organized country. And that is what this big battle is about. Electoral reform, certainly, but it's at a much higher level too. It's also a battle to win the heart, the spirit, the soul of Dominica, to win back a government that works, to bring back governance that delivers results, bring back governance that creates a productive society. That is all what's on the line here. So Monday, come out, join us, be part of that process. It'll help us relaunch Ma Dominic. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you, Mr. Ito, for that reinforcement. Mr. Ito might have a few strands of white beard, but he's a Gen Z, and we heard it from him. We have to look at new strategies. We have to beat them at their game because it's been a long road, and we need to win back and defend and protect Ma Dominic and raise the bar, raise the standard. Thank you for that intervention, Mr. Ito. And as we wind down, because we want to take questions, so we will take our last presenter, Dr. Thompson Fontaine. Are you there?
Hi, Rosie.
And take it away.
All right, let me do that. All right, a very good evening. Let me just say my name is Thompson Fontaine, political leader of the United Workers' Party, and I will be at Parliament on Monday. So I would like to encourage everyone to join us there. I think it's a great effort. Let us show our presence. Let us make our presence felt. And let us be there to express firstly, our disappointment at what is being offered by way of legislation. We have waited too long to get that piece of legislation. And so we need to be very clear about what we seek and what we believe is supposed to be good legislation. So I think it's important for us to be present, to let our voices be heard, and to make that very important statement, notwithstanding the threats that are being made by the Minister of National Security, trying to discourage people to come. If he decides to arrest us, then we'll all be arrested. So what? Some of us have been through that before, so that's not a problem. So we are looking forward to Monday when we can do this. Now, I have very quickly, I know you've been there for a while. I have a couple of areas that I just wanted to point out my disappointment in what I have said. I spent some time looking over that particular bill. And one of my biggest concerns is that the biggest taint, as was defined by the different persons who've looked at it, including the CCJ, is the issue of the bloated voters list. I am not convinced that the legislation addresses this particular issue sufficiently. And probably speakers before may have spoken to that. I came in late, but speakers may have spoken to that. But I just wanted to say that my biggest concern is the fact that it does not really allow for a good cleansing. And that's the reason why I support the call, not for a reconfirmation, but for a complete re-registration. In other words, scrap this bloated list and let everybody who wants to be part of our system in Dominica register afresh. Why I'm concerned about this, I heard from that clip that you played, I heard the Prime Minister saying again, and he's repeated that over and over again, that people will be asked to come to Dominica. That may have been in the mind of the Prime Minister. He may have given those instructions to whoever is drafting this legislation. The fact of the matter is it simply is not there. In fact, it is burned in my mind. Article 51.4 is very clear. It says that persons who are overseas willing to re-register, they will have centers will be established that they'll be able to come in and take a picture and so on and fill out form 31. So that issue that he keeps stating that it's only in Dominica is not true. Overseas centers is very clear. If you're overseas, there'll be centers set up at the discretion of the Electoral Office. The other concern that I have is that you really cannot trust the current system to take care of itself, because we know for a fact, and I have evidentiary proof of this, number of persons who were registered while they were overseas or did not come physically to register, even under the current system. In my constituencies, they found their names, much to their surprise, they found their names on the voters list, having not requested it, having not done it. Their names on the voter list. They only knew their names were there when they were approached to come and vote. And they said, but I'm not even on the voters list. They said, no, yes, but your name is here. Here it is. So they were registered. So I do not trust that particular system to be able to cleanse itself. So if you have this bloated list, it is conceivable that persons who do not reconfirm find their names remaining on the list because they have instructions that these names should not be removed. So I don't trust that system. That's why we should just scrap that completely and totally and have a complete re-registration. That I think is what we should keep pushing for. And that is the other main concern that I have as well with regards to that is the period for reconfirmation is given as 12, possibly 15 months. But even within that, the government has the prerogative to cut that short and call a snap election. Okay? So the question is, if you're going to call a snap election, even while the process is started, even while you're doing the voter ID card, all of that could be in the legislation. But by virtue of having a clause that allows you to call an election during that period, it means that at the end of the day, you could have an election still without voter ID cards, still without the clean list that we have been asking. Okay, so while we are happy that we've seen some evidence, some, if you like, they have agreed to give the national the voter ID card is, I believe it's voter ID card, notwithstanding what was pointed out by Mr. Linton earlier. It is true that in the whatever they presented, but I think that they did not clean that out because everywhere else it says voter ID card, only the picture that shows a national ID card. So I'm hoping that is fixed up. So they've given that, the voter ID cards. They've also given access to the national radio station. On the big issue of the cleansing of the voters list, I am not satisfied that enough is done. And even on that issue alone, we should keep pushing, we should keep fighting. We need to get it right. Let's get a fresh list. Let's get that done over with. All right. There are other areas that I could talk on, but I think those two areas I wanted to highlight has been critically important because even if we get everything else, and we still have a bloated voters list, it will, as Matt said in that clip, still allow him to have his so-called winning legacy. And that is something that the people of Dominica simply should not accept. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fontaine. And you know, you listed a few things, some critical areas, and we really want all the critical areas on, and sanitization of the list is important. If we did not know the importance of sanitization, we all got to know the meaning during COVID. We want the list sanitized, we want re-registration, and we want to lift the bar. So we have a checklist, and everything to lead to free and free election must be checked out in order for us to endorse what we're going into. And that is why, Dominica, we must stand on Monday. We must come out. Every speaker told us why we should come out. You have no other excuse. Even if I don't care what you're getting, if you're waiting for your Christmas ham, if you're waiting for your next contract, if you're waiting for your next brown envelope, it doesn't matter. You need to come out. Even Blessing is coming out, missing toes and missing limbs, whatever. Dominica, come out. Those of you, you know, on the other side, you have some level of integrity. Listen, when our children still at home, we discipline them, we punish them. At school, when the students cheat on a test, they're disqualified or marks are removed. At work, when people steal money at work, especially anywhere, but especially in the financial institutions. As a little girl, I remember hearing people being fired because they did bubble in the workplace. So you mean we are firing people on the job when they steal? We are penalizing our students in school when they cheat on exam. At home, we penalize our children when they steal. You know, as recently as 2020, a parent burnt the child of a hand who stole. Unfortunately, this should be a thing of the past. But that parent was sending a strong message to that child, stealing is wrong. And I condemn the burning of that child because that is an abuse. But that child needed correction. And we have a government and we are supporting them in their cheating and stealing, and we're finding ways to justify it. Dominicans, I'm calling on all those of you who have spoken in the past, and those of you who've never spoken, and those of you who have come out in the past, you need to come out again. And those who've never come out for your first time. Choose integrity over Roosevelt's carrot, over Dominica Labour Party, whatever it is. Choose integrity. You see, this is a time of Advent for those of us who celebrate Christmas, those of us who are Catholics. I know not all of us are church, and I don't mean to disrespect anyone, but the majority of us have some appreciation for integrity, and that is what this fight is about. So come on, but we are almost at the top of the hour and we need to take some questions. So we will have our technician in studio open up the lines and we'll take some questions before we close. We also have an important thing to show you. We have a Caribbean news flash. The Caribbean is looking, the world is looking, and there's a Caribbean news flash that we will show you. So let's open for questions. Earlier, there was a hand up on the platform. We can take your question as well.
I see Charles Williams.
On radio, on those on the live.
I saw Charles Williams' hand was up.
Mr. Charles, are you still here? Do you? Or has your question been answered? Studio, do we have any questions? Oh, Charles,
Sister Rosie, can I speak?
Mr. Williams, you're muted, so we can't hear your question.
Remember, we only have 10 minutes, yeah? We only have 10 minutes.
Yes. Mackenzie, could you unmute Mr. Charles?
No, Charles seems not to.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Any question?
If they're asking if we can speak, but Take into account you have 10 minutes.
Yes. In studio, Matt, do we have any callers? Open up the line and let the callers know the number, please. We only have 10 minutes. Okay, it doesn't seem like we have a question, and Mr. Williams is having some difficulty. Okay, but we could open the lines as well, or open the platform for those of you our guests on the platform. If there's anyone who would like to make an addition or clarify something, okay, Zed is getting Zed, go ahead.
Yeah, Sister Rosie, I think an important thing that we left out, and which is very critical, is the setting of a date for elections in Dominica. I think the biggest disadvantage on setting the playing field for everyone to be able to prepare for elections, to be able to know when this is happening, organize themselves, get the delegates together. I think this idea of a prime minister being able to walk around with the date of an election in his back pocket and to treat it like something that you get people with their pants down and those kinds of petty, just garbage, man, on the principle of democracy. I think that issue fundamentally destroys democratic processes in Dominica. And so I really want us, one of the things that we must not compromise on, in addition to things like re-registration and proper, biometric data, is the idea of ensuring that there is a fixed date for elections in Dominica. We must not compromise on that. It gives an unfair advantage to the incumbent. Thank you.
Yes. That reminds me, I should have apologized for the Honorable Anthony Charles. He was supposed to speak to a fixed date for election. So I am happy you brought this up, because the incumbent has used that to his favor, and feel he can call election at his whim and fancy anytime, anyhow. Thanks for that. We need that, a fixed date for elections. Thank you for that. Anyone else?
Yes, just quickly though, we have not said,
Mr. Boston.
We have not said to the people where they should gather on Monday. And I think we should be able to gather probably on the bayfront around the Gary Hotel area there, the lower down there, the old post office, and then we can walk up together as persons going to Parliament together. So those who want to go inside will, organize themselves with the necessary protocol to do so. And those who want to stand outside will also do so.
Sorry, What's so I'm worried about that, Bosso?
Huh?
Can I make a
I'm worried about what you just suggested, bro. Let the people meet at the Parliament, bro.
Yes, I was about to make the same. I was about to make the same observation, Rosie. Yeah, I was about to make the same observation.
Yes,
that
go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I was about to make the same observation that Zed just had. I can already see a barricade being set up right by the Emancipation roundabout there.
Mm-hmm.
So groups trying to come, they will lock us off. Whereas if persons walking individually, they can't prevent them from walking through that barricade, because they're going to put a barricade there, no doubt about it.
Okay, so we can
so that if
and what Victoria End Street as well.
Yes. So what I would recommend, just tell everybody, get to the Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
Let everybody find their way to the Parliament rather than assembling outside that range, and then they block you off, and it's a problem to get close to the Parliament.
Yeah, I think we should go with that. We should
original instruction anyway.
Yeah, we should go with that. Yes. Somebody was asking where do we meet. I just thought we should have clarified.
But so the plan is just everybody find their way to High Street, the Parliament end on High Street.
We have agreed to that.
Yes. Victoria Street end.
Yeah, man.
Very likely going to block on the Fort Young Hotel end.
I'm saying we have agreed to that. We have agreed to that, Rosie. So let's just go.
Okay, great. So Mackenzie wants to show us a breaking news.
Good evening. We begin tonight in Dominica, where growing unrest signals a brewing constitutional crisis. For nearly 4 consecutive election cycles, Dominican citizens and international observers have raised alarms over a deeply flawed electoral system, one that critics say denies the electorate the free, fair, and transparent elections they deserve. For years, concerns have centered on the voters' registry, which contains an astonishing 74,000 names, significantly more than the island's total population of under 72,000. This discrepancy includes individuals who have long since passed away or emigrated decades ago, yet still somehow remain on the list. Observers find it hard to believe that a citizen can cast a ballot with no more than a name, no identification required. Calls for cleaning up these outdated records have grown louder, but action remains elusive. Instead of addressing these glaring issues, the current Labour Party government has allegedly capitalized on them. Reports claim that Dominican nationals living abroad for over 30 years have been flown back at the government's expense during election periods, sometimes by the plane load, to bolster votes in key constituencies. Critics say this practice blatantly manipulates the vote, eroding public confidence and casting doubt on the integrity of the democratic process. Even the Caribbean Court of Justice, Dominica's highest judicial authority, warned the citizens in July 2022 not to hold another election using that tainted voters list. Despite this, a snap election proceeded just months later, and the government's own high-profile consultation with Justice Dennis Byron, carried out at significant public cost, went nowhere. Recommended reforms were shelved, deepening the sense of crisis. In May 2024, the government finally submitted its proposals for electoral reform to the Electoral Commission. The Commission responded, offering its own suggestions. But instead of collaboration or public engagement, the government is now planning to rush a new election bill through Parliament on December 16th, 2024, just 1 week before Christmas. The Electoral Commission, shockingly, has not received a copy of the final bill, and the public remains in the dark about its content. Dominicans are outraged, and a public assembly is planned in front of Parliament on the very day the bill is introduced. Citizens are demanding transparency, education, and proper consultation before any vote takes place. Observers warn that pushing legislation through without these safeguards not only bypasses the country's constitutional mechanisms, but also threatens the very principles of democracy. As Dominica stands at a critical juncture, the world watches closely. Will the government heed the call for openness and accountability, or will the people's plea for a fair and democratic electoral process go unanswered? We'll continue to monitor this developing story. Maxwell Clark for Clarity News TV.
Yes. Yes.
Very nice, I think. Okay, 10 o'clock, Rosie.
Impressive.
Take it away, Rosie. Take it away. Wow.
Hello. Yes, Mr. Boston, go ahead. Yes. Closing remarks. We are at the end of our program tonight. So take it away, Mr. Boston. Close us.
Well, of course, thank you so much for coming out. I think we had a very good exercise here this evening. People were listening. In fact, I was getting messages on my phone that people on all other network listening, and those who shared the link, people were on. So we had a very large audience listening to us tonight. I think the presenters did quite well. I'm very impressed. And I know, well, it's not the first time I've heard our presenters presenting well, but tonight I think they live up to what we have decided to do this evening. So I want to say thank you so much for making the time off to be here. And like was said earlier on, this collaborative effort will show that we as Dominicans, citizens born here, live here, work here, contributed here, And the Prime Minister have a foolishness saying that they don't like people. I mean, where was the Prime Minister when many of us were working with people, young people, school children, sports people, agricultural people, were there working? So to come now like a zombie in the night and say that we don't love people and we don't care about people is really a fake and a disgrace of a Prime Minister in this modern time. So I think we have to ignore those kind of senseless remarks and focus on what is right for our country and for our people, and to continue to show that we are interested in moving Dominica forward, and we have a part of responsibility and interest in our governance. And what is a Labour Party government, a UWP government, a freedom government? Wrong is wrong. When something is wrong, we ought to say it is wrong. When is it right, we ought to say it is right. And we have identified when some things are right, and we have identified many, many things in this country that have been wrong for all these years. So we're on the right track. And again, just to say to persons that you are invited to Parliament to Parliament on the 16th of December, which is Monday coming. We're going there peacefully to show that we are not abandoning the electoral process struggle. We want comprehensive, fair electoral reform that will provide for open, transparent election and give our people a chance that we send to school with nature to serve our country peacefully without bribe, and to move our country forward like every other country in the Caribbean. And I said in my opening, the Caribbean is doing better than us, the rest of the Caribbean islands are doing better than us because their people are in charge of the electoral process. And we must take charge of the electoral process. If the Labour Party is doing well, we re-elect them. If they're doing foolishness and our country has gone down so bad, we put them out of government. And anybody else that get in the government, the same thing will apply. So they will know that when they put themselves forward for public office, they have to serve with dignity, with honesty, with fairness, and transparency. So again, thank you so much. And let me just say, on Monday, you go to Parliament. Those of us who want to go to the chamber, come properly attired, protocol observed, and those who want to stay outside of Parliament. Let's do this peacefully, and remember the Parliament belongs to us. Since 70,000 of us cannot sit in a house, we devise a mean to elect 21 persons to be in the Parliament and 9 senators to be there as well. And therefore, it is our house, the people's house. And nobody should abuse us, nobody should victimize us, nobody should arrest us from going to our Parliament. So thank you, God bless all of you, and God bless our beautiful community for Dominica.
Thank you, Mr. Boston. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Those of us who are not in Dominica, we will do our Parliament online. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Hey, great job, Rosie. Great job. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you, Zed. Thank you.
He saw a huge mass of land, it was green so high and untamed. It was Sunday, all of